Hello and welcome to the Responsive Family Sleep Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Hawley, holistic sleep coach, lactation consultant, peaceful parenting educator, and mom. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by all the conflicting sleep info, frustrated with sleep information that just plain felt wrong, or searched desperately for a truly gentle and responsive sleep approach, then you are in the right place. In each episode, we'll be answering your most pressing baby and toddler sleep questions, busting those sleep myths, and helping you understand truly developmental, biologically normal baby and toddler sleep, plus encouraging you to trust your intuition along the way. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are talking about logging baby or toddler sleep. Right? So to log or not to log, what is it, when is it helpful? Is it ever helpful? Is it harmful? I want to talk you through this today because a lot of you are probably logging your baby's sleep, potentially over months and months and months. So let's break that down a bit. But before we do, I just want to apologize. I am sick. I have a cold. I feel like my voice probably sounds not at its best. Normally, I would not be recording a podcast right now. I would wait till I was healthy. But this cold is lingering, and my next few weeks are really busy. So I'm actually going to be doing a couple episodes today. So apologies if over the next few weeks, my voice sounds a bit like I have a cold, because I do. So sometimes we just gotta roll with it, right? That is life. That is life in business. That is life in parenting. So back to the topic, logging sleep. When I first started out as a sleep coach, very few parents logged. We had sleep apps, so, they did. It's not that they didn't, but over the last 9 years, it has gotten so much more pervasive that I see parents coming to me having logged like every diaper, feed, and sleep for baby's whole life. And then they want me to look at the app and think it's helpful. And I get that. And it often isn't, right? We often spend a lot of time logging and gathering information that isn't actually helpful. So I find logging sleep to be a mixed bag, as you can tell from the beginning of this podcast. I do ask clients to log sleep for me, often for a few days when we start working together, and then sometimes a few days here and there while we're working together. For some clients where sleep timing is more of a struggle, I'll ask them to log for a bit of a longer time. But it's not something I'm routinely asking every client to log sleep for the entire time that we work together, right? That is generally not helpful. And so, my first question to a parent when they're thinking about logging sleep, or they are logging sleep extensively, is, does this actually help you feel less stressed? Or are you actually fixating on all this data and it's creating more stress and more anxiety and, leading you to believe like there's just one small detail we're going to find. And so I think that's worth reflecting on as a parent, right? In a lot of the families that I work with, I do actually see logging sleep to be more of a negative if you're doing it chronically. I think it leads to this idea that we can micromanage sleep, that we see every little inconsistency and overanalyze it. And that creates a lot of stress and it creates a lot of anxiety. It's a lot of data. And what are we doing with that data? Often nothing, right? And so I think that it's worth reflecting on whether or not that's helpful. The other thing that I feel creates a lot of stress, not just looking at the patterns, constantly searching for why was this day not like that day? Why was that day, better than this day? The other piece of this is that the way that many parents log, in my experience, we miss a lot of light sleep. So they're logging maybe when baby's back in the crib and not when baby is, in light sleep nursing in their arms. And so they look at that and they're like, oh my God, we had a 10-hour night, but my baby only got 8 hours of sleep. And often it's like, no, actually, that's not true. Your baby was barely awake for that week. You were awake, right? You had a serious impact to your sleep, but your baby was barely awake. They were in light sleep during, most of those feeds and soothing things. And so I see parents often underestimating the amount of sleep their baby is getting. And then they're putting it into an app. And most of the apps tend to skew on the high end of typical sleep. So instead of giving the full range, let's say at, 6 to 12 months, the full range would be 12 to 15 hours. Typical, right, range, recommended range. But instead of doing that, they may be just saying 15 hours or 14 to 15 hours, right? So they're skewing on the high end for a given age. And so that can cause stress in and of itself, especially if you have a lower sleep needs child. But then you pair it with the fact that your logging is actually missing some of that lighter sleep. And it really can send some parents on a spiral that their baby is not getting enough sleep, and it's going to hurt their development when the baby is getting just fine amounts of sleep. And so that's a problem I've started seeing a lot more in the last few years, just that gap between how much you think your baby's getting sleep-wise and how much they actually are getting or probably are getting, and then how much they actually need and how much the app tells you that they need. So that's hard, right? Like, we don't need things creating a bunch of stress and anxiety when parenting is also hard, often hard in modern life. We got enough things that are going to make us stressed. We don't need these apps causing more stress. And, people log in lots of ways, so I'm not necessarily hating on the apps. I do know that logging these things can be helpful when you're communicating across caregivers. Maybe you have a nanny and they log naps and bottles during the day. And that way you can show when your baby was up for the day, or if you are parenting between two households, or if you are traveling a lot, and it's a nice way to kind of keep in touch when one parent is traveling and can, peek at the sleep info. And, it can be hard to keep track from day to day, like literally what happened yesterday, like how did they nap yesterday? So I get that there are some positives in some ways it helps with communication. But I think we have to balance that with the fact that it can create a lot of stress and a sense of control and leads to a lot of micromanaging and all of that. Ultimately, there's going to be variation from day to day in how your baby sleeps. And some of that might be related to their sleep timings and some of it might not, right? We can't control sleep. The other thing that I do find with sleep, though, and kind of going back to the cons of logging, is that I find that it can wake some parents up, right? Because instead of just, nursing, getting baby back into their crib, going back to sleep, or bed sharing, kind of roll, just popping them on, shifting falling asleep while they're latched, like whatever, that dynamic looks like for you for nighttime soothing, for like getting the phone and tapping the app and, messing with it. Not only does that get you maybe on a screen, but it also just, again, it's bringing you into that cognitive brain overnight. And that can make it harder for you to go back to sleep. Or you can be like, oh my God, this is the third wake up tonight and we're only at 2 a.m. And, can feed into that anxiety spiral of this night's going to be so terrible. I'm not going to be able to function tomorrow. Like that alone can make your rest of your night harder, right? Than if you just are being woken up by baby. And the other thing that I find problematic is when families come to me having logged sleep extensively, and then they try to share it with me, and the way the apps put that information, I find completely useless. Like absolutely, utterly useless. Maybe there's an app out there that's better. I would love maybe to find it, or I keep joking, I just need to find someone who can code me an app so that parents can put in the times really easily, and then it actually gives me the output I want, right? Because I don't want your average wake window across the whole day. I want to know from day to day, maybe like what is the variation between waking up in the morning, like across days? What is the variation waking up in the morning? What is the variation, between when you get up from your last nap and bedtime? How much variation in nighttime sleep is there? So often it's pooling too much data together or not enough data together. And so I find them really unhelpful. I don't like the way they display the information. I don't like the way they average things. It doesn't really allow me to look for patterns. And like I said, I only have access to the apps, outputs that my clients have tried to share with me. And then I'm like, no, we got to pull it out of here. I just can't. So there could be apps that do a better job on that. But I think that it's easy to think this information is going to be really useful. And then unfortunately it isn't. So all in all, right, I land on the logging has a lot of cons. It can be helpful for short periods of time for specific reasons, right? Sharing with a sleep coach. Maybe if you have some concerns about your baby's sleep in other ways, or maybe if you really need to look at feeding patterns in more detail because you have a feeding challenge, logging feeding can be really helpful, right? In the same way that we wouldn't necessarily want to track food every day, but if we are trying to figure out if our baby's reacting to a food, we might log over a week or two. So I think it has its place, right? And it definitely has its place in facilitating communication across caregivers, but it also really can disrupt our sleep and create a lot of stress and anxiety. And so I think it's good to be mindful here rather than just doing it kind of mindlessly and assuming that it's harmless or always beneficial. So I hope this gives you some food for thought and maybe encourages you to set down the app or the phone and log a little less, or maybe to be a bit more mindful in how you're interacting with that information. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode left you feeling more informed, confident, and encouraged on your sleep journey. And just a reminder before you go that nothing in this episode is individualized to your specific sleep situation, nor is it to be taken as medical advice. Take what resonates, ignore what doesn't, and check with your healthcare provider about any medical concerns. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast so that you'll never miss an episode. And take a moment to rate, review, or share an episode you love on social media. All of that helps parents just like you find me, this podcast, and this gentle and responsive sleep information. I'll see you next time.